guys, Jay here and welcome to another cosplay tutorial. In a previous video I made one of my favorite Keyblades from Kingdom Hearts 2, mostly because I can't make my favorite one, so I just chose the one that I could make, which was Fenrir, which is sitting behind me. So since I have my Kingdom Hearts 3 Sora cosplay done, I figured I might as well make my favorite Keyblade from Kingdom Hearts 3, Ever After. So today I'm going to be showing you how to make this. However, I do have to tell you a couple things that aren't mentioned in the video itself, in the actual tutorial, that I should get out of the way right now. So there's stuff that I can't do exactly the same as the Keyblade because things like that aren't technically possible, or possible with what I'm using, or it's just extremely difficult and I went the easier route. But then there's things also like the hair that goes around the Keyblade itself, which I didn't realize until after I had already started painting everything. Where you can see the hair going over the side, there's more on one side than the other. The back side, the side without the flower, is supposed to have 4, and the front is supposed to have 3. When I counted 3, I counted the other side by accident, so that made this one only have 2. So that was wrong. Just be sure to wrap it in extra time, make it a little bit longer. I messed that up. There's nothing I can do. I can't take it apart or anything, so it was too late at that point. Also, I do mention this in the video itself, but these curls here that are like whatever they're supposed to be, like vines or whatever, they're supposed to have like really tight curls, but that was physically impossible to make. So I tell you what I did here in the video, but it was literally impossible to cut out those pieces and shape them correctly. But anyway, let's get on with the actual tutorial. To start, I'm going to be using a 3/4 inch dowel, as well as this black thin wall PVC that I found in the sprinkler section. And I don't know what size it is, but it fits over the dowel. I'm also going to be using my Kingdom Key to do the measuring because I know about the difference in size. So using the Kingdom Key, I figure out exactly how long I need everything to be, and then I just mark everything off and label it. I do the exact same thing to the PVC pipe, just for the length of the handle. And I can cut the PVC pipe with this nice little PVC cutter that I bought. Now this piece is a little bit too small. I do end up using a larger piece later, but this is mostly doing all the sizing on the fly. I don't do any real measuring. Then I tape a bunch of pieces of paper together, which is, I do this in every video. I draw them all out freehand, so do whatever's best for you. But I just draw out 1/2 of the entire thing, then I cut it out and trace it and flip it over and trace it again, so that now I have one that's just a half piece and one that's a full piece. And then I take the full template and trace and cut it out of 10mm EVA foam. Now this is the Yayahan EVA foam. It is a lot denser than the floor mats and it's a lot harder to cut, so be very careful. Brand new sharp blades are the best idea for cutting any of this foam. In total, you're going to trace out 4 of them, but right here is just the important part of 2 of them. This is where that half template comes in handy. This is the reason I drew out everything this way. Using the half sheet, I can mark out exactly where the halfway point is. And then using this new angled ruler that I got, I'm able to mark out exactly how big I need the channel to be based on where that halfway point was that I made. Then all I have to do is cut the channel out, and as you can see, the dowel fits perfectly. The dowel is actually longer than it needs to be, so I matched the bottom of the tower with the mark that I labeled as the bottom of the tower, and this way I can figure out exactly how much I need to take off, and then I just use a hacksaw. And test fitting one more time, it seems to fit perfectly. I glue everything together with contact cement. Now, contact cement isn't like other glue. You can't just put it together when it's wet. You need to wait for it to be pretty much dry to the point of being just barely tacky, and then you can stick both pieces together and they'll stick together. If you do it while it's wet, the pieces won't glue together correctly. Also, using the squeeze bottle is a lot easier than using it just bought straight from the store with the little brush it comes with. The way I do it is I just squeeze the glue out, and then I use a sponge brush, which you can buy in bulk for really cheap, a good 5 or 6 for $1 at any local hardware store. And I was able to use maybe 2 or 3 on this entire project. Also, when you're gluing down things that are kind of floppy, be sure not to stretch anything because it'll end up warped. And here you can see all the pieces put together works out perfectly. I also made that little bulbous part that goes under it the exact same way. Then, using a brand new blade so it's as sharp as it can possibly be, I very carefully trim off all of the excess foam, being sure not to cut too far in, and then using a Dremel to smooth everything out. So it's the next day now, and I've sanded down everything. This took forever. I mostly had to cut it, so that same angle cutting that I did to take off all the pieces that were too long on here. And then I took this to the belt sander and rounded it all off, and then also used one of these. It's a sanding block, and you just use it like you would sandpaper, and also a Dremel to get basically what I have here. So everything is just rounded off and ovaled, kind of. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing. So I do have to fill this in a little bit. I'll probably fill it in after all of this, like putting it on here. And this is basically this part of the Keyblade now. And then I noticed that there's only one flower on the Keyblade. This side is not as nice as this side, so this is the one I'm going to be putting the flower on. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this, I think 2mm. This is just craft foam, your regular, just normal craft foam. I have to make all of the details that go on the house. And then there's like a little band that goes around the base. Then I'm going to make the flower out of 5mm EVA foam. To make the details on the head of the tower, I just traced out the tower head shape and freehand drew everything onto it. Then for all the details that weren't straight lines, like the side that looks like stone, or the arch for the windowsill, I just cut straight out of the picture. All of this was cut out of 2mm craft foam and contact cemented in place. To make the sun, I just used a circular object that I already had laying around. It was one of my pencil bins. I just happened to have one that was the right size, traced it out, and then to make all the little spikes, I just freehanded every single one of those. Then I traced and cut it out of 10mm EVA foam, and I did this twice and just glued the layers together. I also used a small sanding drum to give all of the spikes a huge bevel. And then to make the flower, I folded a piece of paper in half, drew out what would be half of the flower, and then cut it out. So when you unfold it, it's a full symmetrical piece. And then I cut that out of 5mm craft foam. After using a Dremel to round off the edges, I used a heat gun to heat up the foam, and then I used a planisher that I made so I can give the flower all the curls that it has. Then I make this little piece that looks like a ramp, and on the piece it looks kind of like it would be a nose almost. And this is to raise the flower and kind of angle it because it looks like it's raised and angled a little bit. And this will be hidden behind it and nobody will notice it. Then I cut the roof shape out of the sun so that I can put it in place, and use sandpaper on all of the spikes to get them to be a little bit smoother. It didn't work that well, but they're better than they were. And I glue it in place with contact cement. For the little design that wraps around the base of the tower, I just traced the tower, freehand drew the piece, and cut it out of 2mm foam. And since it wraps around, there is one on each side. Now the hardest part, making the handguards. Just like everything else, this was also freehanded. And I explained how I deviated from the design a little bit already. These are made from 2 layers of 10mm craft foam. And then I used the Dremel, which took literally days to cut in the bevels. To glue the handguards onto the Keyblade, I used cut off pieces of skewer sticks and super glued them in place while also contact cementing all of the foam together. Kind of a hard process, and then I also reinforced all of the foam contact with super glue just in case. And earlier in the build I had forgotten, so now I'm beveling the rest of the sun. So now I'm at the point where everything is basically done on the whole Keyblade. It is a little lopsided. There was nothing I could really do about it, especially the backside looks kind of bad. But most of it is also inaccurate. All of these little curls here, they're actually supposed to be much more curled than that, but there was nothing I could do. The Dremel it did it on this too. The Dremel chewed it up and it does not look good, but from a distance it'll be fine. I also made it so these ones were just carved in rather than actual curls because it strengthened it a little bit. And then the whole bottom of the Keyblade, this whole, like, whatever this bottom piece is called on the Keyblade, it's just not accurate at all. I just did whatever was close enough, and whatever would work. The handle is also not accurate. I just duct taped over the PVC pipe that I used. I tried to encase it in foam and grind it down, but it didn't work out very well. It didn't work out at all like I planned it to. So the hair was probably the most fun part, actually. And all I did was I made a long strip, roughly the same width all the way down, and then added some sides to it. You can just cut out like that if you want, but I didn't think about that and then had to add them on later. And then I just cemented them together with contact cement. And then, so you might be noticing that there's these like rounded pieces here on the end. They're like a donut almost, where it's rounded. There's like no corners on it at all. It's like a cylinder wrapped around, like a dowel wrapped around it, which is exactly what it is. I got these two from Joann's. This one is 10mm and this one is 15mm. And so this one is the same size as the foam that I used for the majority of it. is the 10mm. 15mm would be if I added one of those 5mm ones to it. It'd be about that size. So what I did was I cut them off, and then I just glued them in a circle and glued them around. And I used this one for the majority of it. And then these ones, I cut them, not only did I cut them down, but I cut them in half so that it was like a half circle. And then those went around the bottom here. It's really hard to see, but I put those around the bottom. And then we drilled a hole in the wood, and then I just used a Dremel to go through the foam where the holes were. And this is just the shower curtain hanger thing. There's, I think, 12 in here. Yeah, there's 12 in here, including the one on here. So these also have these little balls at the top. I had to get those off. So on the side that opens up, I just grind it off. There's a little stopper for the balls so that they don't roll around. They just, like, they do this so that you can move them easily across a shower pole or whatever, a curtain rod. They make it so you can pull it back and forth really easily without scratching up stuff. Just grind down the stopper and you can pull them right off. So that's what I did with these, and this is as close as I can get to what it is. It's more like a carabiner for mountain climbing, but those don't fit. I already tried. I couldn't fit one in there. And this is going to be later, but I did get, well, I didn't get it. My mom actually found it because she knew I was looking for these. It's a yellow wig hair extension thing, and I'm going to use this as the keychain because the keychain is wig hair. I was thinking about using some of this and going down the blade, but that looks more of a gold, like just as a gold design that's on it that's meant to simulate her hair coming out rather than actually being hair coming out. So I don't think I want to do that, but I do want to use it for the end where the keychain goes because it'll have maximum movement, whereas doing that out of foam, it'll be really stiff and it won't have like almost any movement at all. This will give me much better, more realistic movement. And also, just so you guys know, it is just Gorilla Glued inside there. I believe earlier in the video I showed that, you know, you could take everything apart still. All I did was I held this big piece upside down and just poured Gorilla Glue into it and then just stuck it together. That's literally it. Then I just did the same thing for pretty much everything else. So now we're going to move on to painting the whole thing. And I'm going to be covering it in Plastidip, except for the handle, which I'm going to, you know, cover. I'm going to put like blue tape over it or something that I can easily get back off. And then I'm going to cover the entire thing in a Plastidip, and then I'm going to spray paint the majority of the paint for the tower, which is all that off-white. We have an off-white spray paint, so I'm just going to use that, and it's kind of an off-white. Then spray the entire thing up there, and then the rest of it I'm going to use acrylics on. On the sun, the wraparound hair, and the bulbous piece that the flower sits on, I used royal gold. For the top of the handguards, I used bright green. For the rooftops of the tower, I used primary blue. And I didn't show it, but I used normal brown on all the wood. Also, anywhere on the tower that I got other paint, I just went back over it with a regular white. I used one called real yellow, which is kind of odd. Isn't that just yellow? So I used yellow on the bottom of the handguards. And you can actually see all of the paint that I'm using in this shot. And then for whatever these are called, I'm not exactly sure what part you would call this. I used a color called Atlantis. It's kind of a teal. And then on the inside of them, I also didn't show this, but I used yellow again. I just used the same colors that I'm using wherever it would be fading and just dry brushing them on, which is where you wipe most of the paint off on a paper towel, and then when you brush it on, it's very light and it kind of blends with whatever's there. I painted the center of the flower with Wisteria, I think it's called. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but it's purple, like a really light lilac purple. In fact, lilac should work just fine. Then I used that same yellow on the outside and did sort of the same dry brushing thing. I made the tip of the roof using 2 wooden balls with holes drilled into them, the size of skewers, and then super gluing them together with skewers. And the cone shape is just 10mm foam glued in and sanded into a cone. This, as well as the rock face on the side of the tower, are both stippled on with light blue with some white added into it to give it a rock kind of texture, and then super glued into place. To make the frying pan, I cut out a disc and a strip, glued them together to make them look like a frying pan, and then cut out a handle shape, and then glued it all together. Then I painted it black, even though it was already black, but the paint looks a lot better than the foam. I put it on one of those curtain hooks to dry, and it worked out really well. I actually hung it from my tripod. And the very last thing to do was to braid the hair, which I had to do off camera because I had to have somebody hold it so it would be tight. But it's just hair braiding. If you don't know how to braid hair, I don't know what to tell you. I used clear hair ties to tie off the top and bottom, and to keep the top loop open, I loosely held it together with a rubber band. Then I put the other end through the hole of the frying pan, used another hair tie and a bunch of super glue to keep everything together. Then after getting the hair onto the curtain hanger, I had to very carefully cut the rubber band without cutting the hair. Luckily I didn't cut the hair, so it's all good. To make the top and the bottom of the handle thicker, like I wanted it to be, I used black duct tape and a bunch of the foam that I had and just layered it on. And by pulling the tape more towards the center, I was able to force the foam into a bevel, which gave it more of the look that I wanted it to have, where it got skinnier in the center. Alright, so that's the entire tutorial. Hope you enjoyed it. You can use this type of thing on other Keyblades as well. The way I did this, you can use it on others too. This is basically what I did with the Fenrir, just a little bit different, and to this one specifically. But both of them are made almost the exact same way, just with slight differences. Anyway, that is it for this video. If you like it, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Subscribe for more, as there will be plenty more tutorials, and I'll see you guys later.